Hello, I am Nancy Trevelato, one of the instructors with the International Academy of Consciousness. And today I'm going to share with you the 10 greatest misconceptions people have when it comes to the conscious out-of-body experience. If you are one of those people who try to leave the body or who would like to have an out-of-body experience, or if you have had them just few times, maybe you have one of these misconceptions which definitely just hinder your possibility of having more out-of-body experiences. So let's see the first one. If you are one of those people who practice techniques to produce conscious astral projection, or perhaps if you sometimes have sensations that you know are precursory sensations to the disconnection from the body, and you know you are detaching and little by little getting closer to leave the body, you may do this very common mistake, which is assuming you are going to detach from your body in an upward direction, like sitting up or just floating or lifting off from the body. This is a situation that not always occurs, and if you have this expectation in your mind, you may end up hindering the natural flow of the projection. Controlling the astral projection at will, it's a mix of knowing when to act and when to let the experience happen. When you sense you are about to detach, please notice first, how is this disconnection happening? Perhaps your legs and arms are disconnecting first. Or perhaps you just feel like you are sliding out to one side. Or perhaps you feel you are sinking in the body as if you were going down instead of up. It doesn't matter. All of them are natural mechanisms of the disconnection. It depends on many different variables, on how your chakras are, which part of your body is more loose, how are the characteristics of the energy of your bedroom or the room where you are at that moment. What is important here is, do not incur in this very basic and common misconception of necessarily creating the expectation that you are going to leave the body going upwards, and therefore maybe hindering or obstructing your opportunity of leaving the body, when the motion out is not necessarily upwards. The second misconception that is very, very common is assuming that there is a perfect or infallible technique to leave the body. Many times when people talk to us, they ask us, what is the technique you do? Or what's the catch for me to always be able to leave the body? And there is no catch or no infallible technique. The very fact that we have many techniques, it's a sign that none are perfect. Because if one were perfect, we didn't need many. The best thing is to get to know your characteristics. Which aspect of a technique would favor you, would help you to perhaps overcome some of the natural limitations you have when it comes to producing your out-of-body experiences? Or which technique is going to make use of some characteristics that you have, which are going to be very well used and employed in that specific technique? So keep in mind, it's a matter of getting to know yourself, trying different techniques, and having the right inner posture. There are many, many aspects and variables involved in producing at will, in a controlled manner, and conscious astral projection. Another very common misconception that you want to avoid is assuming that there are mandatory sensations or stages prior to leaving the body. For example, some people, they think that necessarily they will go through a sleep paralysis. So they keep trying to produce the sleep paralysis for them then to be able to be outside the body or to get disconnected from the body. Others, they may assume that the vibrations, called vibrational state, is a mandatory thing, so they keep trying to look for the vibrations there so that they can disconnect. That is not necessarily like this, and you have to keep in mind there are many, many different types of projections, and we have to be aware of how each of them operate. Sometimes there are projections that they are what we call instantaneous projection, like in a flash you boom, get out, almost with no sensations, but very lucid. Usually these ones tend to surprise us, and in a flash we are back. But there are others that you disconnect part by part of the body and may take a long time. There are many different ones, so bear in mind, the more you understand about how the disconnection from the body happens, the more you'll be able to know what is going on with each sensation or phase you experience in a given condition. The fourth common misconception is assuming that once we are outside the body, conscious, in our bedroom, we will necessarily be able to see our physical body. Seeing the physical body depends on many different things. Number one, adjusting the frequency that you pick with your non-physical vision. The non-physical vision is complex. There are moments in which we can see very precisely the physical environment, and other moments we don't. We see subtle energies, or we see even other dimensions more subtle, and the physical environment is very fuzzy. So it depends a lot on many factors. There is also a very interesting condition that sometimes there are people that they look at their bed, they know their bodies are there, but they don't see their bodies. But that's something for us to discuss in another moment. There are many interesting things in regards to the vision when we are outside the body. But now, keep in mind, do not expect to necessarily to detach and see your body, because that may just create an inner condition, like an emotional expectation that confuses you. And instead of being more and more conscious and lucid, you may just reduce your lucidity and control of the out-of-body experience due to this expectation. Another assumption that less experienced projectors may have is that every time you are outside the body, you will meet somebody, you will have people to interact with, you will see a community, somebody will come and talk to you. That is what most people expect, but also that is usually what makes people afraid of leaving the body. Because they think, who am I going to meet? How can I know it's someone okay, good? How can I know I will be able to handle the situation if it is someone that is not well balanced? Of course, this may happen, and there are specific techniques, and there are elements that we can learn to understand what's going on, and that is not dangerous, but we need to understand to be able to have a nice experience in which we are learning and controlling the experience. But it's important here to understand that many of our projections, we are outside the body without interacting with anyone. Interactions happen when there are specific encounters with consciousnesses, people in between lives that have some connection with us, or we go to specific communities or places in the astral dimension. Most of the time, you will be sensing yourself floating, you'll be flying, you will be observing the environment where you are. Perhaps you'll be floating there up the ceiling of your house. There are so many things that happen until we get to the moment of immediately having lots of interactions. Now, a parenthesis is, of course, if you have someone who is too close, someone non-physical, like in spirit, who may be a presence that is too close in a sense that it's always stuck around, present there in your bedroom, for example. You may sense that presence. You may even see, but that's not because you were out of the body and visit some place and immediately, bam, you are talking to somebody. That is because there was someone who was already in a great connection, in a great rapport with you, and present most of the time or very often, and therefore this makes it easier and more probable for this interaction. That's great, because then you can know what's in there that perhaps you were not conscious of until then. Take advantage. One of the wrong assumptions I see people doing when I teach, and I have been seeing throughout these 2.5, 3 decades, teaching the out-of-body experience and how to sense subtle energies, how to control your energies, how to sense the multidimensional reality. All the time, what I observe is that people who have already had a previous experience, they create inside of themselves like a framework of how their experience will develop, either in terms of how they will sense their chakras and their energy, or how they will sense the disconnection from the body in an out-of-body experience, or what's going to be the sequence of different events and phenomena that they may experience until they detach from the body. That's a big problem, because sometimes the way your experience, let's say the astral projection, will develop in that given session you are doing may be completely different. There are many factors that are involved in that. Just as examples, how lucid your energy field is, meaning the energetic interface, the energy that connects your physical body to your non-physical astral body. So it will make great difference on how easily you detach and how you feel it, what type of sensations you will have. But also, if during the day you have had any contact with people and you received some energies, which is natural, but you remained with some residues of those energies, this will interfere or affect how your experience, the out-of-body experience, will develop, how easily you are going to detach. If that is going to be denser sensations, if the energies are denser, or if they are more subtle, what sort of perception you will have. So that will always be different. Sometimes there are people that in a given experience, and there is a case of a student that I am remembering right now, that they had an experience in which he saw like some shapes, geometric shapes and colors, and he just got into that until he had a lucid out-of-body experience. Okay. Then, years later, he's practicing a technique. He's with us in the class, and we are guiding an exercise to leave the body. And he couldn't, but he was very close to leave the body. He had all the right energetic conditions based on what he described and what we could see. He had the right physical conditions, but he couldn't, because then he told us, in his mind, he kept all the time looking for the same images he saw, the same patterns, and as if he had to see that, because necessarily that was what would guide him outside the body, or impose him to detach from the body. So this is a very common misconception. Of course, because the sensations we have experienced in our previous projections, lucid projections, will now be very strong inside of us. And when the sensation was nice and the projection was nice, great. We think that's how it's going to happen. Not necessarily it is. But sometimes the projection was mixed with some fears, maybe we didn't have enough knowledge. And then again, when you observe it's about to start, you have same reactions as if you are getting ready to something not so pleasant as in the past have happened. Please bear in mind that the more you can completely let go of the expectations of the sensations and the process that will be related to that given experience, the better it will be. It does not mean you will let go of what you have learned, of your experience. That is valuable and you need to understand what happened. But assuming that's what is going to happen in that given session or technique you are practicing, then that's not favorable. That will end up reducing your chances of leaving the body. So keep an eye for that. The seventh aspect you want to avoid is assuming that whenever you are detaching from the body and you sense a presence that is very tangible, like a spiritual presence, you feel almost as physical, that is necessarily someone evil. We tend to jump into conclusion in this case when either we have had experiences in the past, especially when we were children, when we were at very early age, and we have had experiences that were not as pleasant. Maybe the environment we projected into was not as positive. So we tend to now immediately be spooked if we sense a very tangible presence. Other times we have heard too much stories of people with sleep paralysis and encountering someone not balanced, which of course is possible, but there are aspects for us to understand and to master about that. It's not something that we have to be a victim of. But in cases like this, most of the time, the projector assumes it is something evil, which is not necessarily the case. So you want to be attentive of that. But on the same token, the eighth aspect I want to discuss is the opposite of it. It's people assuming whoever is out there, oh, it's an angel, it's a being of light, will always be positive, it's someone to help. There are those, there are many, and they are there to support us. But not necessarily they are the ones you are sensing. So what is it that we have to do to avoid these two common misconceptions or assumptions that we just jump to conclusion? It's to give ourselves a moment, observe what's going on, not being afraid, not being anxious, sensing the type of energy that is there in the environment or that is emanating from that presence you are sensing. Sensing it and analyzing it in an unbiased way. Then you will know, and you will know if it's someone positive, what you have to do. There are many different aspects that we can learn to help us take advantage of it. But if it's someone not balanced, well, there is no reason for us to feel like we have no power to deal with that. There are very direct techniques that we can employ. But it's very important that we are aware of it if it happens so that we can employ the techniques and make sure that is no longer going to happen, or we will make everything possible for those presents do not have so much space and freedom to get close to us in a moment like that. Does it make sense? So it's required that we are observing in an unbiased way and then knowing how to proceed. The ninth common misconception in regards to the out-of-body experience that I want to bring to you here is the fact that most people assume that if they had a lucid separation from the body, a lucid disconnection, they will remain lucid throughout their experience outside the body, and they will remember afterwards. Do you sometimes expect that? Keep an eye on it, because you may judge wrongly your experience if you always expect it will be in this way. Of course, in many cases it is, but not necessarily. You may have a completely conscious separation from the body, but then afterwards, due to different reasons, the level of density of the energies that are around your astral body, your non-physical body at that time, or the place where you go to, or your emotional state. If you see something that you are too happy, if you celebrate too much, you are outside the body, or any of these things, the emotional fluctuation or any of these surprises, or the fact that the energies may be a little denser in your energy body. Denser do not mean negative, just mean how much energy is present there. So these different elements may cause that your lucidity reduces after you got out of the body and you were lucid until then. So you want to pay attention to it, because there may be cases in which you remember getting out lucidly, having some experiences or some events you witness, or some things that you do outside the body consciously, but from a moment on, your lucidity, your awareness and control may reduce within the same experience. And an even further wrong misconception, a bigger one, is assuming that if you are lucid when disconnecting and lucid during your out-of-body experience, you will recall the experience upon waking up. That is a big misconception, because many times we do have a fully conscious out-of-body experience, the whole experience, but we do not remember. There are cases in which we are going to remember days later, so you know, oh, I had that experience, but you hadn't remembered before. And there are many other different situations, like sometimes you may be in an out-of-body experience, and there, when you are outside, you remember an experience you had like a month before or whatever, that you had not remembered when you were inside your body until then. So you know that there were real conscious experiences that you didn't remember. Sometimes there are cases, for example, in which we may have an experience that tell us we were lucid in that previous night, for example, or whatever, and we confirm that during the day. Once, for example, I was traveling to meet someone I didn't know. And when I got to the place and I saw the person, I remembered I had spoken with her before in an out-of-body experience that last night, the previous night. And I knew how her house was. I knew how she was going to be dressed. I knew what we were going to talk about. I knew some of the papers and documents she was going to show me, because I had been in contact with her and talked about that before. It's different than a déjà vu, because we may have a déjà vu or a déjà vu in which we see something and we think, I have experienced this before. No, what I'm talking about is a different phenomenon, a different sensation, and it happens in a different way. But this shows that there was a lucid out-of-body experience which I did not remember. And I only came to remember when I arrived in the place and just had a glimpse at the person, and everything came to my mind. You may have your own observations and your own experiences. You may have experiences, for example, in which you were outside the body, projected with a friend, and you remember perfectly the experience in the following day. You are very conscious, but your friend, who was also conscious outside of the body when he or she were with you there in the projection, don't remember anything, or just remember fragments. Do not remember the whole thing. So what we are seeing is, remembering is one phase. Being lucid outside the body, the previous one is completely separate and different. And having a conscious disconnection from the body, it's another thing. One does not mean the other. But of course, if you have a conscious disconnection, you have greater chances of being conscious and lucid and in control during your experience, which will therefore give you a chance of having something to remember and gives you a chance of remembering. Because if your experience were not lucid, you don't even have anything to remember of. So keep that in mind, and do not allow this assumption put you down as if you feel, I don't control this experience and I'm not understanding what sort of experience I'm having. So this is super important here. Hope you have wonderful experiences in this case and remember them all. And we still have another misconception to discuss. This is the last and 10th misconception we are going to discuss in this video, which is the fact of assuming that once you produce one out-of-body experience at will, you will necessarily be able to produce another one when you try to again. This is very common when someone, and maybe your case, have been trying for a long time, different techniques, different angles, and finally the person managed to produce the out-of-body experience at will. And then the person thinks, now I learned it, I know how to do it, I will be able. And then, following night, they go, okay, I'm going to repeat the same technique and this time I'll do it. But it may be the case in which some variable is different. Not necessarily the intention of the person, not necessarily the motivation, not necessarily the type of technique they will apply or the sequence, but some factor that is beyond the person's capacity to control may interfere and not allow the projection to happen. So if that happens to you, you know there's nothing wrong. That's how it is. Learning to control your out-of-body experiences at will, producing them at will, is more than just having one experience. It's more than just seeing something outside the body. It's learning how your physical body connects with the non-physical body of yours, how your energies perform, how your vision, your awareness works outside the body, what are the mechanisms, what this non-physical environment, astral dimension, is made of, how it operates. So that is fantastic. There is so much for us to learn. And each experience, even when we try but we did not succeed, can teach us something. That is very important. Teaching what is hindering us can be very important, because otherwise you cannot work on the element, on the variable that you need to adjust. So I leave here with you all of these ideas for you to examine if perhaps you have one of these misconceptions, and this may be stopping you from fully controlling or having better results with your attempts of producing a conscious out-of-body experience. And I'll see you in one of the future videos with more tips for you. Thank you for being with us. Remember, please, to give us a thumbs up if the video was useful, and subscribe to this channel. It's going to be a pleasure to see you here again, and it's going to be very helpful. Goodbye. Thank you.